And now it's time for us to discuss more of these headlines in simple keywords with Adam joining us via Zoom. Good morning, Adam.
Good morning, Lena.
The sun is shining bright on your face, which means the sun is rising earlier.
It is. It's not quite up there just yet, but yes, it's creeping up steadily.
Spring is upon us. So some of the changes I
Yes.
want to share that with our listeners. Let's begin our keyword news portion with South Korea's latest efforts to keep a competitive edge in key technologies. This is our first pick of the day.
Chip cluster.
So Korea's plan to create the world's largest semiconductor cluster in the Seoul metropolitan area with huge investments from Samsung Electronics. Can you tell us the details of the plan?
Yeah, so this is basically a very Samsung-heavy investment in line with the government's kind of overall aim of making Korea this semiconductor powerhouse globally. Now, the aim is to get the chip hub complete by 2042. So this project is going to span over 2 decades. Samsung will invest some 300 trillion won, that's roughly $230 billion into it. The cluster of facilities will be built in various locations in Gyeonggi province. The center will be anchored by 5 new chip plants built by Samsung in a 7 million square meter industrial complex in Yongin. The cluster will create a Samsung chip belt connecting Gyeong, Hwasong, Pyeongtaek, and Yongin. Now, the government seeks to invest heavily in 6 technology areas in particular. They are chips, displays, rechargeable batteries, electric vehicles, robotics, and biotechnology. So basically, the sectors of which the government sees future growth in. Now, the Semiconductor Center will aim to attract 150 other companies, which will be producing materials and components or designing high-tech chips. Market watchers and some foreign media outlets say this will be a game changer for Samsung to challenge the global market dominance of Taiwan's TSMC. Now, Samsung and TSMC are the only 2 chip makers in the country that produce these high-tech semiconductors. And so that's why Samsung is very wary of its rival and wants to get that lion's share of the market share. Now, the government also says the hub will fortify closer cooperation among nearby chip businesses in the province as well. So it's not just going to benefit Samsung, but other local businesses too. It will also house about 150 leading local and foreign semiconductor firms. As well as the Yongin mega cluster, 14 more complexes will be set up across the country as well. They will transition as hubs for future growth areas, the ones that I mentioned before. President Yoon said the measures are a declaration that Korea will make a great leap to becoming the global top semiconductor powerhouse. The government is also planning other incentives, such as tax incentives and other support measures to lure in more investment as well.
All right, let's move on to our second keyword of the day.
Big summit.
So all eyes are on the Seoul-Tokyo summit. Literally all of my early morning news updates, CNN and New York Times, Washington Post, talking about it because it hasn't happened in over a decade. The leaders of Korea and Japan are holding a much anticipated summit today in Tokyo. What can we expect?
Right, so as you mentioned, it will be the first such summit in 12 years. So it's been more than a decade, in fact. And then Yoon and Kishida are hoping to mend what has been fraught ties between the 2 countries. They are expected to revive regular visits between the leaders in what has been called shuttle diplomacy. Kishida is reportedly considering visiting Korea as early as this summer. That's something we mentioned yesterday as well. Yoon said that he expects to invigorate security cooperation, including the intelligence sharing pact, GSOMIA. The 2 leaders are also expected to confirm the restart of bilateral security dialogues, which have been suspended since 2018, and they are also seeking to have more trilateral cooperation with the US as well. There's going to be another meeting, security meeting, between the 3 countries next month as well, so we'll see how that goes out, especially after today's summit. Kishida may also extend an invitation to Yoon to attend the G7 summit set to take place in Hiroshima in May. Now, the 2 leaders could also resolve the issue of Japan's export curbs against Korea. The presidential office here said the 2 countries were discussing the matter and that it expected it to be resolved in due time. Now, also, a Korea-Japan currency swap arrangement could also be touched upon during the meeting. It was once a symbol of bilateral financial cooperation. The deal expired, however, in February 2015, and talks to restore it since then became strained amid the row, especially over Japan's wartime sexual slavery and this whole so-called comfort women issue. And the Yoon administration has again indicated its desire to restore it. So yes, a lot of eyes will be on today's summit between those two leaders, especially in light of that forced labor compensation plan, the controversial one that was announced by the government here recently. So we'll have to see if that issue is also touched upon as well. But of course, we'll have more updates, I guess, tomorrow.
Tomorrow, indeed. I mean, it seems that hopes are remaining high, but some officials have also indicated that the meeting is unlikely to produce significant next steps on issues like, as you've said, lifting Japanese restrictions on tech exports to South Korea. But instead, maybe this could be a test of how well the two leaders assuage domestic opinions about the historical differences that's been at the center of strained ties. We'll have to wait and see.
Yeah. So one thing to note about these kind of top level or what is a high level diplomacy and summits is, especially between leaders of two countries, in most cases, they usually set a kind of a big picture. They agree to agree on things, basically, and then it kind of trickles down into detailed policies for the related ministries and officials below them. So yeah, they'll kind of set a big framework, and then I think more developments will come after that.
Well, what kind of tone will they set? We'll have more updates, as RM said, tomorrow morning. Let's move on to our third keyword of the day.
Ears open.
So top office says that the government will decide on the maximum weekly work hours after collecting more public opinions on the matter, especially from the younger generation. This comes after some backlash, especially from young workers, over the government's plan to revise that 52-hour work week. It's aimed at flexibility, but is there too much loopholes for employers to potentially take advantage?
Yeah, so that's the aim anyway, but there's been a lot of criticism that's saying it actually might not be as flexible or even less flexible than the government had hoped. The top office therefore vowed to carefully listen to the voices of vulnerable workers. Businesses, though, are mostly happy about the revision plan, but of course critics, especially those millennials, MZ generation, as it's being dubbed in Korea, as well as Gen Z, complained it could force them to overwork. That's because many employers, they believe, don't really give them that privilege of taking time off work in compensation for working more hours during one particular week as well. Now, the presidential office spokesperson Kim Eun-hye told reporters that the focus of Yoon's labor market policy is on protecting the rights and interests of MZ workers, non-union members, and workers at SMEs and other vulnerable workers as well. She noted that the working hour flexibilization policy is meant to allow what was bound by weeks to be changed to months, quarters, and halves and years, and to be freely discussed between labor and management. So basically, putting the policy outline out there, but then ultimately the agreement being made between employers and employees. But she said that it is open to review as per Yoon's instruction. The Labour Minister, Lee Jong-sik, also hinted that the government may make changes to the proposed revision as well. Asked whether the government would change the proposed, what is being dubbed 69-hour work week now, he replied that the government leaves open all possibilities.
All right, so still discussions are on the way as far as the flexible work hours go. We move on to our fourth keyword of the day.
Mask rule eased.
So as expected, the mandate on wearing face masks on public transportations will be lifted on Monday. Can you tell us the details of what's being changed?
Right, so this essentially ends all mask mandates that were imposed since 2020 in light of the pandemic. The types of public transport where people are no longer required to wear masks next week include public buses as well as school buses, the subway, KTX bullet trains, taxis, and planes as well. It's a relief for me, particularly because I went on holiday recently, and wearing a mask on a plane for a long period of time certainly does suffocate a bit. Now, the announcement comes as Korea Study confirms COVID-19 cases remain in the 11,000s as of yesterday. However, the government strongly recommends wearing masks for those with symptoms or high-risk groups, especially during the rush hour. Wearing masks in pharmacies at open public spaces, such as inside train stations and discount stores, will also be lifted as well. So that kind of alleviates the kind of question and concerns that we had of that we arose recently about, well, if you don't need a mask in these shopping malls, for example, and you need to go to the pharmacy,
What do
you need
do?
to buy one, especially to get into the pharmacy? It all seems a bit inefficient, but that concern has been quashed for the moment. Now, the mandate will remain for people at medical institutions, though, as well as general pharmacies and other vulnerable facilities as well. Now, the 7-day isolation mandate for COVID-19 patients does remain the country's last COVID restriction. Now, ending the isolation requirement is also under discussion. A final decision is expected to be made this month, so we could see that rule being lifted soon as well.
All right, with that, we move on to our final keyword of the day.
Rivals meet.
So the new People Power Party chairman Kim Ki-yeon has met with Democratic Party of Korea chairman Lee Jae-myung. They have stressed bipartisan effort to take care of people's livelihoods first, so focusing on shared interests instead of attacking each other on day one. Run us through what they discussed.
Right, so he congratulated Kim firstly on his election as the new PPP chairman. The meeting lasted about 30 minutes, and their aides said the atmosphere was cordial and the discussions focused on cooperative politics, as they put it. They also promised to discuss policy issues on a rolling basis as well, kind of hinting at more meetings of similar nature. Now, even if the rival parties are at loggerheads over some issues, Kim said the parties should quickly pass less contentious bills. He responded that he was willing to cooperate any time unless the policy or agenda item presented by the government or PPP was regressive or wrong. That's been a connotation that the opposition party has used a lot for the ruling party and government's policies. Now, he noted the severity of Korea's economic situation, saying the DP and PPP should also form what he called a pan-national emergency economic consultation body. They also discussed the controversial 69-hour work week and agreed that the Labour Ministry's proposal needed adjustment. Kim told reporters that he didn't agree with the 69-hour work cap and said the PPP and the government will decide after canvassing more opinions. They reportedly did not discuss thorny issues such as the government's compensation plan for victims of forced labour, as well as corruption allegations surrounding the DP chairman. That's been one of the key kind of points that has led to tensions between the Democratic Party and the ruling party, as well as the government. But of course, despite these cordial greetings and bipartisan promises, few believe that this will result in the two parties narrowing their differences on various political matters. We've seen it time and time again before. They always say they'll work together, but when it comes to the nitty-gritty things, nothing really happens.
Because there are such large fundamental differences on what they're fighting for. And if you think about it from just an arm's distance, we need the two-party system at the very least so the pendulum can go back and forth and discussions can continue. But it always does get messy. This was just a cordial hello, congratulations.
Yeah, I mean, it's a positive sign nonetheless, but one that we need to take a huge grain of salt with.
Thank you very much, Adam, for today's discussions. I'll see you tomorrow.
You're very welcome. See you tomorrow.
If you're listening to our program using the podcast service, just a reminder that we do go live Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. Korea Standard Time. So tune in and help us make the show more informative by giving us your input. See you bright and early on Good Morning Seoul.